right now. And the interpretation feature, I will start it as soon as I go over the first slides. But Lindsay, please let me know when you're ready.
Okay. I'm ready, Ingrid. Do you want me to call the meeting to order and then hand it off to you, or do you want to begin?
No,
I forget the order of operations. Last meeting.
Yes. Yeah, the meeting needs to be called, and then I'll go ahead and share my screen.
Cool. Thank you. All right. So it is March 21st. It is a Tuesday. It is 6:05 p.m. and we're calling to order this meeting of the Human Relations Commission of the City of Boulder. And we will pass it off to Ingrid to go over the logistics. Thank you, Ingrid.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody. Welcome to our Zoom meeting, the Human Relations Commission meeting. This is an interpret meeting, so please select the choice in which you prefer to listen to this meeting at the bottom of the screen once the interpretation feature is on. It's not on yet, but it will be shortly. I would like to remind you that the guidelines for interpreted meetings are pretty straightforward. We ask of all speakers to please speak slowly, clearly pronounce your words, and breathe between sentences. Avoid interrupting the speakers. And if you do have a headset with a microphone, please use it. That will avoid any kind of background noise. You will be able to select the channel, as I said, once the interpretation feature is on, and mute yourself when you're not speaking. We ask of you to please avoid using any kind of idioms or expressions that might not be necessarily easy to interpret. Our interpreters are extremely skilled and they are processing an immense amount of words per minute and it is due to consideration to them to please avoid using any kind of idioms. We will go over the public participation guidelines. I'm going to go ahead and turn on the interpretation feature right away, so you can select it, and this portion of the meeting can be interpreted. So please go ahead and select the language of your choice. And if someone is able to give me a thumbs up.
Do you need a thumbs up from Carlos? Okay, there you go.
Thank you.
Works for me.
Wonderful.
Thanks,
Thank
Carlos.
You. It is incredible that we're able to foster language justice through these meetings, so thank you. The guidelines for public participation in city meetings are also a set of guidelines that have been co-created with community members to have productive, meaningful, and inclusive civic conversations. The vision that we have supports the physical, emotional safety of all community members, staff, the commissioners, as well as the democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. If you wish to access more information regarding this vision and the community engagement process, please visit the website that is available in the screen. Or if you wish, you can reach out to me and I'll be happy to provide you with a set of them. These are some of the examples that are part of the revised code and other guidelines that support this vision. And these will be upheld during this meeting. One of them is that all remarks and testimony should be limited to matters related to city business. No participant should make threats or use any other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that interrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct a meeting are prohibited. Participants are required to sign up using the name they are commonly known by, and individuals must display their name before being allowed to speak online. We allow audio testimony, and with that, I'll pass it on to Lindsay.
Thank you, Ingrid. Okay, the first item then is any agenda adjustments. I don't know of any. Do any of the other commissioners or the staff? Christine.
Hi, everybody. Apologies, but I can't be on camera today. I have some family stuff going on, but I'm happy to be able to join through audio today. I had one question, which I don't know if it actually rises to the merit of needing an agenda adjustment, but I did want to note that I believe at the last city council meeting, when they appointed new members of commissions, there was a discussion about the process of joining a board and a commission. And I believe that there was discussion that the city was going to be looking into possibly revising any of that. And I didn't know, I would hope that would be a process that we as the HRC can participate in particular, because one of the things that was specifically called out was how to increase diversity among board and commission members. So I don't know if this is just something we note now and bring back at a future date, or if that's something, we should just have a very quick touch base on tonight as well.
Lindsay, if I may, I thank you, Christine. I think we do have in the staff update part of the agenda, kind of at the end, just a quick note about HRC appointments and some upcoming training. So I would suggest maybe we have kind of capture that in that agenda item, so we're not kind of necessarily adding a brand new discussion, and we can capture, Ingrid and I, any just preliminary thoughts that you all have and want to share.
That sounds great. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.
Thanks, Elizabeth, and thanks, Christine. And we're glad that you can be here too and join by audio. Okay, so we will talk about that in the staff comments, which would be, I believe, item 7, Roman numeral 7. Yes. Okay, cool. And that if there's nothing else for agenda adjustments, looks like there's not, we'll move on to the approval of minutes for January 23rd. Again, this is the moment for commissioners to make any adjustments if they see anything inaccurate or needing attention in the previous meeting's minutes. And if nothing, then we bring it to a vote to approve the minutes. Just give folks a moment. All right, well then we'll open it up for a motion to approve the minutes from the January 23rd meeting. Carlos, I'm not sure if I'm having an audio issue, but I saw you come off of mute and I did not hear anything. Maybe an audio issue or an interpretation button issue.
I
You didn't-
approve. I didn't hear Carlos either.
Okay.
So I move to approve the minutes from the January 23rd meeting of 2023.
Yo secundo la moción.
And thank you, Carlos. And thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Carlos. And thanks for working out that non-audio issue with me. And then that brings us to a vote. We're looking for either a verbal or a visual aye. And Christine, raise your hand for aye, come off mute for anything else so you can't come off of video. Okay, and then JH, I didn't see you, but I just wasn't looking at you. Can you? Okay.
Can you hear me?
Thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
You're welcome. So the ayes have it, and we have approved the minutes from the January meeting. Okay, that brings us to item 4, which is our open comment. And I know that we have former Commissioner Art Fiegel here to speak. So, and there also may be others, but we'll begin by handing it off to Art.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Excellent. It's kind of fun to be on this side of things for once. Thank you, Commission, for allowing me to address you during public comment. My name is Art Fiegel. I live in the city of Boulder, and I'd like to comment on 2 topics. One is adding housing status as a protected class to the Human Rights Ordinance. Sorry. Oops. Sorry, that just popped up over my notes here, but thank you for the timer. Okay. So one is adding housing status as a protected class to the HRO. The second is overdose prevention center authorization. There's a bill in front of the state of Colorado legislature. So first, from my previous role as a commissioner on the HRC, I recognize that adding housing status as a protected class has been discussed at least informally among the HRC and staff before. And while I'm not certain, there may have been some resistance in the past. The Human Rights Ordinance protects against illegal discrimination within the city limits of Boulder, and adding any additional protections to the HRO is a complex matter that requires careful consideration. That said, I believe adding housing status is worthy of your consideration. People who are unhoused in the city of Boulder are among our most vulnerable residents. And while there may be many different situations that lead to that, many people who are unhoused in the city of Boulder are facing multiple layers of marginalization. In the face of our policies and programs, which may be biased towards those who are most likely to succeed, we must put protections in place for those who are the most vulnerable. So second is HB 23-1202. That's the Overdose Prevention Center authorization. I don't know if the city has taken a stance on this. I haven't looked carefully into that. If the city has not, I'd like to encourage the HRC to ask council to help lobby for passage of HB 23-1202. The state currently has a restriction in place that prevents municipalities from establishing life-saving overdose prevention centers. If this bill passes, then Denver, which has already passed such a bill, and the city of Boulder, which could consider it, would be able to explore this as an option in the future. Those are the 2 things I had, and I look forward to listening in on the rest of the meeting.
Thanks so much for your comments, Art. Hold one moment. Ingrid, has anybody else indicated to you that they would like to speak during the open comment period?
No, we can move on.
Thank you. And just as so we have a lengthy discussion about the first issue that Art raised. As a follow-up to his second request, I'm wondering if, just because this is my last meeting on the HRC, I'm wondering, and I don't think we've made a request or really like lobbied for anything from council for some time. And I think certainly since some of the newer commissioners have been on the commission, I'm wondering if staff could respond with just specifically with the mechanisms that we might use to do that as a commission. And that way we can move forward if there are time constraints or anything like that.
Sure. Just a couple thoughts on that or any other policy that may come up on your plates or on your minds for the state legislative session. So City Council has a kind of policy platform document that was just recently is revisited, updated and discussed. And one thing I think Ingrid and I can do is just be sure to point HRC commissioners in the right direction to be able to kind of see what that policy document is. It just provides a foundation, if not kind of the floor, if not the ceiling, to policy issues as they come up at the state or federal level. And then I would point to the process that commissioners used back in the fall regarding, at the time it was the even kind of a position, kind of a joint letter from commissioners to City Council on the election, even versus odd years election, to be able to craft a memo, a communication to council, and staff can certainly advise on helping get that to council members. But that can happen in a variety of ways, but we're more than happy if the commissioners do want to follow through on that or any other item, just to enable you to do that. Ingrid and I and other staff are not quite so constrained when we're not in an actual election season. So we can maybe help in a little bit of a different way, just to navigate that communication. Is that helpful, Lindsay?
That's helpful. Thanks, Elizabeth. And thank you for the reminder about the election letter that we wrote. I think that's a really good example. Art, I'd like to call you back in because I think one detail that I missed is the timing around the second issue that you brought up.
That's HB 23-1202, Overdose Prevention Center authorization. And I don't know that I know the exact timing on that. Somebody else actually on your panel later might. I believe it's, what is it? It's under consideration. It was introduced, it's under consideration. That's the status on the ledge.colorado.gov site, but I don't know what the timing is, sorry.
Okay, well, it's helpful for that call number because we can research it. And I think the last little process point there may be to consider that for the agenda setting committee to consider that for the next meeting. And we'll move on. And we do not have any official action items tonight, which brings us to our main event, which is the protected classes panel that Art referenced. So we have a number of experts here to speak in this panel. It's a presentation panel format. And the objective of this item is really for these individuals joining us tonight to help us understand as an HRC to really understand the Human Rights Ordinance, the concept of expanding protections, what the impacts of adding a protected class to the Human Rights Ordinance might be, both unintended, anticipated and intended, and potentially unintended. And then after those panelists have a chance to really do the more presentation oriented part of the item, where they present information to us, we commissioners to ask follow-up questions. After we've done those presentations, the Q&A panel format, commissioners will discuss amongst themselves how if to continue exploring this item. For example, commissioners could discuss exploring putting the item on their work plan, writing a letter to council, or decide that they've heard enough. We really want to thank everybody for joining us at the meeting today. This especially, there are community members who have been following this item for a long time, and through a lengthy pause. I think the first time we started talking about this was certainly in 2022, and I think it was even in early 2022. And it came up when Art heard about this happening in a different municipality, and asked some community members and like content experts, what might this look like in Boulder? Since then, we've really been building towards tonight's exploration. So I have a lot of appreciation for all of you joining us. In the interest of time, I imagine all of you panelists know this, but just so we are setting the expectation around timing, we're hoping each panelist can take up to 10 minutes to talk about a particular sub item within this topic. And that will lead us to our Q&A a little after 7. And are there any questions or things to add from staff, commissioners, questions from panelists?
Hi, everybody. Elizabeth Crow, Deputy Director for City Housing Human Services. Just want to echo, it's taken a minute, for us to get this on the agenda. Thank you for being here, Art. So just really interested in having a good conversation. I just want to let folks know, in addition to panelists, we have Megan Newton here, who's our city homelessness policy advisor, who's just really available. Thank you, Megan, as a resource if a question comes up about data, or kind of strategic plans or programs that are already in place, anything like that. Megan is a great person to answer those questions. And I would also just suggest we have the kind of the ground rules for, community or public engagement with the meetings, but just assuming that, part of the panel is just really, we want to listen and learn from each other and other people who are going to watch this recording and kind of paying attention to this topic, just here to really learn from folks. So assuming Lindsay will everybody has their chance. It can be Q&A kind of among panelists as well, but just to follow the same guidelines that we do when we have community members here and participating. I would expect nothing different, but probably good just to state the obvious, and really look forward to a great conversation. Thanks.
Thanks, Elizabeth. And before I pass it to Ingrid, I'm just going to make a more like closer to when guests are going to be speaking reminder of the interpretation, especially when we're asking folks to keep to a time limit. It can be people are inclined to speak quickly, but please remember to speak slowly. Make every effort to please remember to speak slowly, so the interpreters have an easier time of keeping up. And we thank you. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Ingrid to explain what is the Human Rights Ordinance. Many of us are familiar, some of us are not. Ingrid, please take it away, or please inform us.
Thank you, Lindsay. Good evening, everybody. My name is Ingrid Castro. For those of you who I haven't had the pleasure to meet, and audiences who might be hearing this later, I serve as the Human Relations Commission Secretary and support this commission. However, in my day-to-day most of my day goes to my role as the Human Rights Program Manager. I do process claims regarding to violations to the Human Rights Ordinance. And the Human Rights Ordinance grants protections to, is an additional protection to people who live or work in Boulder within city limits, who might experience discrimination in housing, employment, and public accommodations. This is based on our municipal code, Title 12, Chapter 1. And there are a set of definitions that include protected classes. I will go ahead and add those to the chat for you to have in writing because it's very specific. And then I will go ahead and walk you through the process of how processing claims specific related to discrimination are processed. So I'm just copying that in the chat. There is a list of protected classes already covered by the ordinance. I'm having issues pasting it, but I'll do it in a minute because I'm not taking notes right now, but I have multiple windows open. The protected classes that are listed and make discrimination unlawful are based on individuals' race, color, sex, or other characteristics. And those characteristics place people into those protected classes, and everyone belongs to a number of those protected classes, so they intercept. Those protected classes are, as listed currently in the ordinance, are ancestry, color, creed, gender variance, gender characteristics, immigration status, marital status, mental disability, national origin, physical disability, race, religion, sex, sexual orientation, source of income, age, pregnancy and parenthood, and custody of a minor child. Those three listed at the end, including age, is specific to be for people that are 40 years and older and applies to the area of employment. Pregnancy applies to the area of employment and housing. And custody of a minor child protected classes applied to the area of housing. So it is, as I said, based on intersections between these particular characteristics that those decisions regarding housing, employment, or public accommodations may qualify someone to file a claim. Claims are processed through different channels. People can file a claim over the phone. They can file a claim online. They can do it in person. And once the claim is filed, we have a conversation about the event, the evidence, and then we process the investigation process, which entails reaching out to the other party, depending on what it's at stake, especially when there is a desire to preserve the relationship, whether that is a work relationship or it is a landlord-tenant relationship. The approach is always intended to not only protect the person, but also protect the good at stake, meaning that a restorative approach, mediation approach is often more effective. That is in a nutshell how the process goes. After that evidence is collected, both versions are captured, and hopefully there's a resolution and an agreement that actually has the weight of, has a legal weight. In case that a agreement is not met, we can take further actions, but the objective of the process is to be transparent, to be able to provide the claimant with a evidence-based results and findings to move forward with that process. So we, it was last year during the retreat, we had a session where our attorney came to the retreat and we went over the human rights ordinance a little bit more in depth. We talked about the other component of the ordinance, or the other ordinance that we enforce, which is the failure to pay wages. And I'm not gonna dive even deeper into employment practices, but it also protects any individual against discrimination in employment under the same premises. If you have any questions about the ordinance, you can reach out and we can walk through the process, or we can be more specific in terms of what the code says in a specific instances where discrimination is unlawful.
Thank you so much, Ingrid. And just a note on questions. In the interest of time, if all of the commissioners can please hold your like more content-oriented questions until the end. But if there is a clarity-oriented question, like for example, a panelist is using a term and like you're completely unfamiliar with it, so you can't understand what that panelist is talking about, please jump in with that clarity question, because it those kind of things typically help everybody's understanding. But otherwise, hold your questions until the end. And thank you again, Ingrid, for helping us understand that context about the human rights ordinance. So next up, we have panelists helping us understand the concept of expanding protected classes. Within this sub item here, we have Bill Sweeney and the representative joining us from the ACLU, who is Kat Ordonez. Thank you both for joining us today. And Kat, I'm wondering if you would be willing to go first. Thank you for joining us. Oh, and Kat, I can't hear you.
I said an embarrassing amount of words before I realized that I was muted. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the chance to be here with you all. I will admit from the start that I thought this was going to be Q&A and not presentation based. So what I'm going to try to do here is to hit some points that I think might come up or anticipate questions that I think you might have.
Thank you, Kat, for improvising, and sorry for that lack of clarity.
No worries, no worries at all. So the first thing that I'll touch on is the question of what issue this would address. And from my perspective, the issue is rampant discrimination against unhoused people. That's a problem nationally. I'm based in Denver. We see it here, and I know it's a problem across Colorado as well. Other cities have decided to address that discrimination against unhoused people through their own municipal non-discrimination laws. So I can point you, if it's helpful, to the cities that have incorporated houselessness as a protected class. And those are at least Salem, Oregon, Washington, D.C., and Madison, Wisconsin. One misconception or possible misconception that I wanted to address. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Please let me pause. My name is Kat Ordonez. I'm from the ACLU of Colorado. I am the policy counsel there. Apologies for not starting with that. Now I'll head back. So one possible misconception here is that expanding this city's non-discrimination law to include houselessness as a protected class would somehow impact constitutional claims. But the city doesn't have power to change how either the state or the federal constitution are interpreted by the courts. And the concept of protected class and the potential debate about, well, is a protected class based on identity? Can it be situational? That debate actually does not need to take place here, because the city will just be deciding on its own that it's going to provide these protections to unhoused people. So to the extent that that is a concern or a question that anyone has, that would be my first point to make, that it's not relevant to the analysis at the city level. Further than that, I would also point out, if there are any individuals who are still concerned about that question, I would point out that the city's human rights ordinance already includes various protected classes that are at least arguably situational and not identity-based. So some that I can point to would be marital status, gender characteristics, religion, pregnancy, source of income. All of those are not inherently permanent, and they can change, just as housing status can change. So whether or not you believe that the question to be relevant, I would say that under these circumstances, houselessness is definitely appropriate to add to the human rights ordinance. And I think at this point, that is all of the points that I have to affirmatively make. I will be happy to answer any questions as they come up. And thank you again for having me here.
Thank you so much for being here. And thank you again for improvising and for that clarity through improvising. Okay, and then next we have, in order to help us understand the concept of expanding protected classes, we also have Bill Sweeney. And just a note for people joining us. One thing that we've asked Bill to prepare, just as kind of like a clarifying point, is there is also this concept of social precarity as a protected class that Bill explained to me and to Art, and that I shared with commissioners when we were first discussing this issue last spring. And I found it difficult to understand. So I invited Bill to add that to the context around expanding protected classes. So that is some context. And Bill, I'd like to hand it over to you. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you very much. And thank you for inviting me to speak this evening. Thank you to all the commissioners. And Lindsay, I'm sorry to hear if you're leaving. I've enjoyed working with you. Just to give a moment of history here, I think I began conversations on this topic with Clay Fong about 5 years ago. So it's been a long time that we've been chatting about this on and off. The first thing I wanted to talk about was what you asked me to prepare, and that's the concept of social precarity. What UCAT had discussed was a test based upon unhoused status or housing status. And that's fine, and that's a perfectly good test used in many cases. Social precarity is an overlapping concept. It's used often in sociology and in European law, rather than the test of houselessness. So it's abject poverty in a simple way of looking at it. But the first use of social precarity, and I realize I need to slow down, so I will, was by Dorothy Day, writing in 1950. And she said, nowadays, communities are good, I'm sure, but they are very mistaken about poverty. Communities accept, indeed admit on principle, poverty in its existence. Yet everything material must be good and strong. Buildings must be fireproof. Property rights must be sacrosanct. Precarity is rejected everywhere, and yet precarity is an essential element of poverty. That doesn't directly define precarity, but it gives a sort of a boundary to it. The European Union is using in several settings the idea that social precarity can be defined as the factors related to higher risks of social exclusion along two dimensions. The first is living conditions, and that would be things like poverty, access to finances, access to social capital, and so forth. And the other is in working life, and that would be access to job quality, work pressure, skill development, and things of that nature. The final, I work with, among the things that I do, I work with a research group, a multidisciplinary research group looking into issues around poverty and homelessness. And we have a working definition of precarity that eventually will be part of some of our publications, but I thought I would bring it in tonight. So we are looking at precarity is a condition of politically and systemically generated economic and social vulnerability. It is a form of disempowerment. It is experienced as incapacity to cope. It is itself rooted in a misalignment between responsibility and power. When precarity is understood this way, it is a social injustice that cuts across difference in class, education, employment, and income. It harms people's material and psychological welfare, and it hampers society's capacity to manage adversity, to maximize its values, and to govern itself. So when you put all those together, it's a substantial area to think about. Hard to define, though, and not yet defined in law, so it may not be the best key, but it's a good way to talk. I also brought in some other things. In addition to the cities that you named, Kat, there's also Portland, Louisville, and I think, did you have Madison? I think you did have Madison. So that there's a few other cities that are in this area. Every one of these cities has made a very limited and not necessarily at all the same, a very limited choice of what they will protect in protecting against discrimination on the basis of housing condition. So sometimes it's very narrow, a little part of the employment area, a little part of the housing area, and extension and fair housing, for example. It may be an employment right. But there is not a sweeping civic level law in place yet. There are, however, at higher levels, some. Rhode Island, for example, has a homeless bill of rights. And that also has been brought forward in our legislature twice here in Colorado, and both times defeated. A different model, but similar. The model that's there in place in Rhode Island has been there for quite a few years. Rhode Island as a state has about the same geographic extent as the county of Denver and the county of Boulder together, and has about the same population. It has about perhaps a quarter of the homelessness that we see in those two counties here. They have a fairly peaceful time. A quick perusal of the Providence newspapers doesn't show red hot editorials about homelessness. They're located within an easy access on both public transport and highways to Boston, to Hartford, to New Haven, which all have relatively difficult homelessness problems. So there may be something in this Bill of Rights that is helpful. So the rights, there are two that are specifically rights about anti-discrimination on the basis of housing. That's the right to move and to use public spaces, and the right to equal treatment by all agencies. There's a right to equal treatment in employment on the basis of the attributes of lack of housing status, for example, the lack of a permanent mailing address. There is a right to emergency medical care. I think that pretty well exists in Colorado without anything at this point being added to the statutes. There is a right to vote, which is very interesting. And that access is without discrimination due to housing status. And
Bill, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We have a question for clarity for you from Christine Commissioner.
Hi, Bill. Thank you. I just
Yeah.
wanted to double check. You're referring now to the various rights in the Rhode Island.
That is correct.
Right,
This is
okay, thank you.
this is just a quick scan through the Rhode Island Bill of Rights.
Thank you. Got it. Thanks.
And I apologize if I didn't make that clear. And so finally, there's a protection from disclosure of the records that people who are homeless and in homeless systems are required to make by the systems. And so there's a high level of protection of privacy there. Strangely enough, this was amended a couple of years ago to add an eighth right, which was to extend on a certain basis the right that exists under the Fair Housing Act to bring support animals into housing when that housing is a public shelter, which is a gap in the fair housing coverage right now. Fair housing coverage generally will not apply to public shelters. In Europe, there's a kind of an interesting thing. Matthew Desmond, many of you may have read his book on eviction, published a new book. It was released today. It's on poverty. One of his points in his new book is that in the United States, as compared to in the European system, the social safety net has a different quality. And the European social safety net is more likely to be accessible to those who are unhoused or in social precarity than the social safety net in the United States. It's more difficult to access what we have. what we have is a social safety net works well, but not at the very bottom of the rungs. The interesting things that have come out of the European focus is that there's a much greater problem with refugees who are not absorbed in the society, even greater than our immigration problem. And so they have classed their work on the rights of the unhoused into two different segments. One, which is being discussed at the Central European headquarters, is the rights of vulnerable persons who are displaced. And that is a very short list that has been adopted. And that's a right to equal protection. And it's undefined as to what that scope may be. A right to access law and justice. A right to participate in local democracy as long as one is resident. And a right to general support, even though one is not entitled as a matter of law to the local safety net. Now that contrasts with the Lisbon Declaration, which is a platform for combating homelessness in the sense that we think of it, which has been adopted in the past year. It's very similar to the concepts that underlie the program called Built for Zero, which we and many other jurisdictions are working with, in the sense that it has a goal of making homelessness rare, brief, and non-recurring. And so the rights that are in this group are that no one sleeps rough for lack of appropriate, safe accommodation. So there's shelter for everyone. No one lives in emergency or transitional accommodation longer than is required to successfully move into permanent housing. So there's available housing. No one is discharged from any institution without an offer of appropriate housing. So no discharge to the sidewalk. And no one is discriminated against due to their homeless status. So it's a kind of a sweeping catch-all. So that is now being rolled out for implementation in national legal settings across Europe.
Thank you, Bill. I don't want to interrupt you, but I wanted to give you a time check. Was that it?
That was all that I had.
Oh, perfect timing. Thank you so much, Bill. Really appreciate your offering us that perspective. And next, we welcome back to the HRC Carmen Atilano, who is the former HRC secretary. And Carmen, I hope I'm remembering your title correctly, the community relations manager for quite a long time with the city. So thanks for joining us again.
It's a pleasure to be back and nice to see you, Lindsay, and looking at everybody there. Many figures have changed, and great to know that the work that you're all doing. Having been away from Boulder for almost 5 years, I can't claim to know whether adding unhoused or homeless as a protected class is the right choice for the community, but I might be able to help identify some of the issues to be considered in that decision after 25 years experience in the human rights ordinance. I was the staff liaison to the HRC and handled the policy decisions of the HRC with the city council. During my time there, we added several protected classes to the ordinance. You probably know that the city of Boulder is a home rule municipality. That means that local ordinances, you can expand protections that are unique to the Boulder community and local control of remedy as well. And that's the beauty of the human rights ordinance, that you can do that. So I'll start with some context. In reflection of the times of human rights enforcement, there's many types of discrimination in society. not all of which is considered to be destructive or even unfair. A real simple example I'll give you is car rental companies, for example. They have policies of refusing service to people under 25, and there isn't much opposition to that. So, just to be present that there are many different types of discrimination. So identifying protected classes is a process of determining what types of discrimination are harmful or unfair. So within your scope of looking at that, that's what I encourage you to look at. And I think Kat and William alluded to that as well. But just some historical context is, there's also some historical context that might be helpful. Protected classes have evolved over time. Initially, they were made up of people who had no control over the circumstances that resulted in historic discrimination, such as skin color, race. So the defense of protecting them from discrimination was straightforward. It's unfair to discriminate against someone for the qualities that they have no ability to control. Some protected classes added over time have been less clear in that regard, such as source of income, immigration status. So the defense of protecting them from discrimination is more complicated, but still needed to be protected. So that brings me to the first issue I'd like to raise for consideration. So looking at the breadth and the diversity of the homeless community, including families, veterans, people with physical and mental health issues, students, people who may say they choose to be homeless. In some cases, what justification for protection will best stand up to the challenges from the various entities that will oppose it is what you'll have to look at in trying to add this as a protected class. The second issue I'd like to mention is the objective of adding homeless people as a protected class. What do you hope to achieve by adding homelessness or houselessness? Note that Boulder's ordinance and other anti-discrimination measures, they don't end discrimination. Targeting sectors of the community identified as protected. If someone does not, an example I'll give you is that if somebody doesn't want to rent to a non-white applicant, for example, the ordinance doesn't force them to. In fact, it can't really do much at all unless the landlord created evidence that they turned down the applicant because they are not white. I think it's safe to conclude that there's a significant gap between the number of cases in which, for example, race or creed or sexual orientation was considered in a rental application and the number of cases in which evidence that it was considered is found. So that's something to take note of. However, but by sending the message that the city does not approve of excluding people based on race, creed, or other protected quality, it can contribute to the development of a culture in which discrimination is broadly discouraged. An example I'll give you is genetic characteristics. We added that to the ordinance because of the expanding technology in the medical field. We never received, I don't know, in the 5 years since I've left Boulder, if you've ever received a discrimination complaint on genetic characteristics. We never did while I was there for about 15 years after we added it. But it was, as I stated, sending a message that the city did not approve of it, of that type of behavior. Past civil rights work has been quite effective at creating that culture in much of the country, but arguably not very effective in some areas. Another issue, a third issue I'll mention, is whether adding unhoused as a protected class is the best approach to achieve your objective of of trying to minimize discrimination against the unhoused. During my time with the Office of Human Rights, there were cases in which it was, there were cases in which it was and one in which it wasn't at all. An example of the former would be the addition of gender identity to the ordinance, for example. I think it has afforded protections to non-binary people, and it has sent a message that the city opposes excluding them from housing, employment, and public accommodation. An example I'll give you, so that's an example where adding it as a protected class worked, and it's really effective. An example in which creating a new protected class did not work was the complaints we fielded having to do with wage theft. We were getting numerous, growing complaints on wage theft, and they were numerous, and many of the complainants said they believed the employer stiffed them wages because of their race, because of their immigrant status, because of language limitations or other characteristics. So as we examined that, our approach was to create an entirely different ordinance that made wage theft illegal regardless of protected class. So within a short time, the number of wage theft cases passed the number of discrimination cases with wages of many workers recovered as the result of that. And that became the failure to pay wages complaint, wage ordinance. So the last issue that I'll address with you is staff preparation. Staff responsible for enforcing an extension of the anti-discrimination ordinance will initially have to conduct what amounts to an educational campaign because of the confusion and misinformation regarding what the ordinance does. Some of the comments and questions will be far removed from the reality of the ordinance. An example I'll give you is with gender identity. We received many angry calls suggesting that transgender people will be given preference for housing over straight white people. We got quite a few of those actually. Or the bathroom issue, which bathroom does a non-binary person welcome to go into? That was one that took a lot of public education. And a second increase in demand on, and another thing to consider is an increase in demand on staff time. Will be the number of cases that will need to be investigated and resolved. So the investigation takes time, often 3 months at the shortest to a year or more, depending on the way the parties involved respond. So I ask you to look at, if you're dealing with issues of an unhoused population where it is an immediate need, will adding unhoused to the discrimination, to the anti-discrimination ordinance, what will that be in the best, how will that be in the best interest of meeting that basic need for that population? Perhaps it will, perhaps not, but that's something for you to consider as well. So that's my 2 cents. So thanks for your interest in hearing that, and I look forward to answering any questions that you may have later.
Thank you, Carmen. And finally, we have Ana Silvia Avendano here to explain the equity assessment and how it might apply to this agenda item.
Thanks. 5 minutes.
Oh, Anna Sylvia, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I'm having a hard time hearing you.
How
The
about now?
audio is better. Mhm.
Yep, this is my microphone. Good evening. My name is Ana Silvia Avendaño Curiel. I serve this community and all of my colleagues and all of you as the Equity Policy Advisor for the city. Carmen, it's such a pleasure to see you and wisdom from you. So thank you. I really appreciate it. I had the honor to work alongside Carmen for a couple of years, and I am able to stand on her shoulders. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
One of the things that I bring to you today is share with you the framework that at the city we have adopted to make sure that any kind of process that we're evaluating and analyzing in terms of a new program, a new policy, a change or an addition to a policy, or things like that can really be considered and put through what we call a racial equity instrument. So let me give you a bit of a background of how this instrument came to us. We, in 2018, when the city of Boulder began its, its journey on centering really equity work at the forefront of everything we do and really uproot systems of oppression, we partnered with GARE, the Government Alliance for Racial Equity, in 2018. And that partnership really afforded us the opportunity to learn from expert practitioners in this field, not only within the government, but also within the equity sphere, that at the time, there wasn't positions like mine, for example, right, that exist. There wasn't positions like equity liaisons or ambassadors. It was really we were at the hands of people like us who've been in this field for many, many years, really educating us and informing us about the disparities that existed within systems, right? And so this instrument was created by GARE, and we were trained, a couple of staff members that were part of that Racial Equity Core Team 1, which Elizabeth Crow was actually one of them. We were trained to offer 2 trainings to the city. One of them was Advancing Racial Equity, the Role of Government, that really speaks to a lot of the history and the concept of race, right, as a social construct and how that was created and how, because of that, systems and institutions were completely created to keep populations, right, oppressed and others to have the affordability of a better life. Through this instrument, and if I may, actually, I would love to give you a visual as I'm just talking about these points. This instrument allows us to walk through 6-step process that really helps us to dig into what are some of the questions we need to be asking ourselves whenever we're considering a change or in addition to a program or a policy or a service in the city. These 6 steps go through 1, establishing our outcomes. So really something that I offer this commission, and I really appreciate the dialogue, right? Even just this dialogue, being able to have it, to consider information is going to be really important. This instrument can really help this commission to walk through what are the questions we need to be asking ourselves, right? What are the actual outcomes? And like Ms. Carmen, like how she referred to as, what do you want? What do you hope to accomplish with having homelessness as an added protection in the ordinance, right? Collecting data. The step number 2 is really digging into what is the quantitative data and the qualitative data that we have, whether it's within our own systems, like within the city, of say how many police calls our police department attend to somebody who's experiencing homelessness, right? While at the same time connecting with our outside partners in the city that provide services to people experiencing homelessness. And so really being able to look at all of that data to see, what do we know about the data? What's informing our thought process and decisions? Step number 3 is really how to measure and how do we determine the benefits and the burdens. So really in both of these determined benefits, there could be a lot of benefits that could be added, right? As you decide to possibly include the homelessness or housing discrimination in this ordinance. There could also be a lot of added burdens possibly that we haven't maybe considered. And that's really something that I would invite everyone to think about on both ends. One of the things that I believe this instrument, what it really helps us and supports us, is being better at standing sort of in this middle realm, right? That our human nature would probably like to just decide one way or another, be in either opposition or position, right? Or support. That might be easy, but there's a lot of things and nuances in the middle that I think need to also be considered, right? In order for us to know that if by adding something, we're really taking into consideration the experiences that perhaps within this commission we've never even thought about, right? Step number 4 is really developing strategies. So knowing once a decision is made, whether to accept it or to keep it as is, if we were to move forward, what are some of the strategies that can actually inform how it gets enforced? What are some of those burdens or benefits around enforcing something that could create, right, on both realms, good or bad, right, to either both the community at large, the people experiencing homelessness, as well as sort of the internal that Carmen alluded to, right, the internal staff time. Not that that is a decision, right, because of staff time, but something to consider of, do we then, does that lead us to think about more budget needs to actually be committed to this work because there needs to be more hands-on support, et cetera, et cetera. Step 5 really focuses on the implementation and evaluation and seeing, is this actually working how we wanted it to work, how we sort of envisioned it? And if it's not, can we go back to the steps and think about maybe what are some of the things that we missed? And the beautiful thing about this step, that what I'm learning as I'm implementing it in my own work and in the groups that I collaborate, is that one should remain flexible to be able to go back and forth and determine, we considered this, but we actually did not even consider that this could bring up different issues, right? The reporting back is something that I also consider is important, because as this continues to be a public issue, a public interest, really reporting back to a community and those we serve to better understand, not to only just have the education, but to better understand why we're adding this if your commission chooses to add it, why we're not putting it on here if you decide to not put it on there. And what is the space for people to have that dialogue and conversation, even in the thick of how complicated this issue can be and can come across. I'm going to pause there because this racial equity instrument can be really heady and really conceptual based. So I'm going to pause for any questions that anyone may have to see if I can offer more insight. Okay. And this is also something, as you walk through each step, it drives you to think of certain questions, right? Maybe we haven't considered, it asks you to be thinking about the populations that it could be impacting or influencing, the communities, the issue areas or proposal. The one really important aspects that I really want to point to this is, it cannot be filled in siloed. It cannot be filled by just one person. It's really kind of a team effort of connecting the dots between people and the thinking, because everybody brings different experiences to the table, right? And then the second thing is, this instrument ultimately allows us to keep asking questions and really get at the root of the why. All right, so if we know we are, as a commission, you're considering adding homelessness, why is there people experiencing homelessness? What are the root causes? Once there's root causes identified, then keep digging to ask, okay, why do those root causes exist, right? Whether it's mental health, accessing medications, right? Not being able to access identification to be able to get access to medications. Maybe recently coming out of the jail system, right? Having no other social or family support. And so by really talking and thinking through these root causes, the more we can really uproot and understand systemic isms. And when we can really understand and kind of grasp that, then we can continue to put forth measures that can really benefit a lot of other people.
Thank you, Ana Silvia.
Yeah.
And thank you to all of the panelists. Everyone did such a wonderful job staying on time, and we're still just a little bit behind time. So I don't want to go on too long, but it's really bolstering how much collective experience is joined us on the panel. And I'm really heartened by that. And I feel a lot of appreciation for all of you who joined us. So thank you for coming and for speaking with us and helping us understand and contextualize this issue. It's really appreciated. This brings us to our commissioners' discussion and question and answer period. So we're going to have 20 minutes, up to 20 minutes for questions and answers for the panelists, and then commissioners will discuss how to continue engaging with this item. And I'm going to say how to continue engaging with this item, right? Because there was like a repeated call from the panelists to focus on objectives, right? So we will be continuing to engage somehow, right? Because there are needs and reasons this issue is coming up. So I'm going to hand it off to commissioners for questions for the panelists. If you have a question for a specific panelist, commissioners, please point that out by referencing that person by name. And if it's a general question, and it's open to the panel, we can just allow one of the panelists to respond, and then the other panelists to add on after that person's had a moment to respond. Carlos, and then Christine.
Yo quiero preguntarle a Bill, ¿qué es lo que cree que provoca o que causa la precariedad social?
Thank you, Carlos. Social precarity is, by and large, the product of capitalism for all practical purposes, Carlos. The very idea that people are not valued for their personhood, but are valued for their social utility, and that their place in society is one of utility, is, in my view, less than ideal. So what I would be looking for really is more in the areas of protection from hate, protection from being able to perform the ordinary functions of life without discrimination.
Thank you, Carlos and Bill. Christine?
So I thank you very much to all of the panelists for coming tonight. I have several questions, and I kind of wonder if I should just ask them all at once or do them one at a time.
I have a suggestion, Christine. Yeah. Could you please continue to ask your questions, and then we'll ask commissioners to, if a question occurs to them, to jump in with a hand up reaction, and then we can I can look out for that and say, like, okay, Christine, please hold your questions. We're going to pass it to Fikar or JH.
Okay. All right. I will ask them in order of I guess, informationally what I think might make the most sense, one at a time. I guess my first question, my first question, I guess, would be for Carmen and maybe Ingrid too, and that is around the historical context in the city of Boulder with changes to the human rights ordinance. I'm wondering, one, is there a place where we can, or is it maybe easy to get to a place where we can see prior changes to the human rights ordinance and sort of when they happened, and learn a little bit about the process by which it happened, and by process I mean not just like the sort of step-by-step like political process, but also the political environment in which they occurred. And then related to that, Carmen, you sort of mentioned gender identity as an example where there was actually quite a lot of, some pushback afterwards, and a lot of people, writing in to complain. And part of the reason I'm asking this question is I just kind of want to name the elephant in the room, so to speak, which is that homelessness is such a political hot issue right now in our community. It's so hot. And, I just want to make sure that we're all mindful of that and not just sort of having this discussion in an abstract, bureaucratic way, but also keeping in mind that it's hot right now. It's just a very hot topic. So I guess that's my first question. I'll start there.
There's been 5 added since the ordinance was adopted in the 1970s. There had been, I believe, 5 protected classes added. One was sexual orientation that predated me with the ordinance. So sexual orientation, and then it was genetic characteristics, gender variance, which then was renamed to be gender identity, income. What was the one you added? I worked on the preliminary information on it, but there was one I left. It had not yet passed of
Source of income.
Source of income, thank you. Source of income, and then last, immigration status. So within a trajectory of the 1970s to now, there's been 5 protected classes. Okay, so to give you the rationales of why they were created, and within the pros and the cons, the rationales, it would be looking at those memos to City Council and to the HRC and to City Council. It is if I'm answering your question correctly, there will need to be, as well as what took place with all these protected classes, an intense public process related to meeting with groups as well as with City Council. So, I would, if you just look at Washington D.C.'s adding homelessness as a protected class, they pretty much considered it for 10 years. And it was last year that they added it, and they first assured that the fiscal and staff impact of it was well considered. Because one thing I ask you to do is, it's great to add protections, but make sure you have the arm in which to enforce it. Because then you just have, if you don't have the force within your municipality to enforce it, then are you really doing a service to that sector of the population that is needing that protection? So I hope I answered your first part of your question. Your second part was related to, could you repeat a little summary of the second?
Just trying to understand the political context in which a lot of these changes occurred. And I only brought up gender identity because you had mentioned that as an example in which there was even after the ordinance was changed, notable blowback within the community.
Okay, and you know, just because you have the blowback, or it doesn't mean you shouldn't protect the class. It
Of
just
course,
means you
yes.
have that into consideration. The reason that the previous protected classes were added was primarily through community request, and also two things. Community was coming to the HRC and to City Council requesting these added protections. And then the other thing was inquiries coming into the Office of Human Rights. We continue to see an increased number, for instance, of transgender individuals coming in and being frustrated that they were feeling that public accommodations were not servicing them well, and that they could not go to a bathroom of their choice, for instance. And so there were incidents that were coming to us in the Office of Human Rights, as well as to public comment in HRC or City Council, that led us to develop the rationale as to why that merited addition as a protected class.
Great. And when was that particular change adopted?
And gender identity?
Yes.
Let me see, I'm going by my memory. I think it was either 1998 or 99. What? Or 2000? Do you have it, Ingrid? It was in the late 90s or early 2000s.
Okay.
That it was added.
And sorry, you said the most recent change was immigration status?
Right, and source of income.
And when were those?
Those were added, I believe it was 2020, perhaps. I had already left the city, but it was around then, and we were working on the policy change when I left, but in 2018. So, you know, it took about a couple years, more or less, to get that added as protected classes.
Great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Christine, I would like to add, and I appreciate Carmen's wealth of knowledge and history and impact that you had and all the work that you did over your time here at the city. I lack of that, Christine. But I have to say that based on my short time at the office and the claims that I have received, that's why I was kind of highlighting the intersectionality, because when I get claims regarding discrimination, the door is open to everybody. So for instance, I have worked with people who might have unstable housing or be unhoused, and that comes later on in the claim. Is not the focus of the claim. The claim is related to something else, and a different identifier or circumstance. I wanted to share that, and also wanted to share that when claims come through and due to eliminating barriers to filing claims and accessing services, that I think that kind of guarantees access to the process itself. So I wanted to share that, and the fact that in any of the protected classes as they are, I just started this work this year with my work plan on campaigning and increasing awareness in the community and promoting education. on the protected classes as they are right now. So we're launching sort of an educational campaign that goes throughout the year, every month, on different topics that pertain to different protected classes. That requires an immense amount of work, an immense amount of collaboration between departments, and highlighting also the work that is already being done through community relations and partnerships. So is not an easy task, but I'm hoping to build a robust series of campaigns that promote human rights this year and build on that for next year's and then in the years to come. So I completely agree on the educational component of it and moving the needle on exposing more community members to issues that are affecting our community members.
That's great to hear, Ingrid. Thank you.
If I could just add a couple things. One is when I started off in emphasizing that you are a home rule municipality and that you can have local control of the remedy. The beauty of the Human Rights Ordinance, which I always thought intriguing while I worked on its enforcement, was there's a heavy emphasis on conciliation. And that's why mediation is important. It's not so much about a win or a lose or trying to prove that somebody did wrong. It's more the thing of education. So it's really great to hear what Ingrid's next steps will be in expanding that. I would invite you to talk with the mediation program as well, related to how such type of cases could get mediated. When you look at the totality of cases that came through the Office of Human Rights, very few go all the way to quasi-judicial hearing, which you are the quasi-judicial body for. And so very few cases, it's far and few between where you actually heard one, because the emphasis of staff is always to try to reach some type of a conciliation in the effort to meet the needs of the complainant. And so that was just something I wanted to add. It's just the type of remedies that you seek. And if I ask you to think, if one of the remedies you're seeking is to house the unhoused, then what is the best approach in doing that? We did receive complaints from homeless. That was a constant in the Office of Human Rights. We got complaints from homeless people, but they were always complaints based on other personal characteristics, such as mental health, perhaps sex, perhaps race. I mean, there could be other characteristics as to why they had filed the complaint. But it turned out that they were also unhoused. But so.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
And I just want to jump in with a note on time. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, Ingrid, for your responses. And just a note on time, we have now about 4 minutes left on our Q&A portion. So commissioners, if you have a question forming, please jump in. And then Christine, I'm going to just hand it back to you.
Okay, I'll just jump in with my last two questions, which are kind of go together, and I think I'll ask both Bill and Kat if you could elaborate on this. We've seen this happen in other municipalities that you mentioned across the country, and my understanding is it's all fairly recent too. So I guess my question is, from what you've observed in other cities where this has happened, it seems like the bare minimum is that adopting housing status as in a human rights ordinance is making a statement, but beyond that, what are some of the other goals that you have seen spelled out elsewhere? And are we far along enough yet where we can actually see what enforcement looks like?
Do you want to take a shot?
Sure, I might have to do some further research into this enforcement question and get back to you. One thing that comes to mind when you ask about what beyond making a statement or a declaration of the city's values could be produced by this. One example would be an unhoused person applying for housing who would otherwise be denied that housing by virtue of being unhoused. So this potential landlord could discriminate against this person based on their current housing status. And in the end, having this unhoused individual in housing is a net social good that I think everyone can get behind. So that is one impact from this that would not just be the city making a declaration, but would have some tangible impact on real people.
I think one of the things that has been true about the adopted municipal ordinances across the United States is that each city has picked generally only one or two very narrow areas in which to extend the protection, whether that be employment or housing or the object of hate crime or something of that nature. I think that there's a lot to be said for examining literally the conduct that's directed towards those who are unhoused and the literal hate content that exists there, and to consider whether a hate crime statute would simply help all of us to have a better society.
I'm going to transgress my own time reminder here because I have a question about this. So I'm hoping to get some clarity around what is the connection between protected classes and hate crimes. If I'm a member of a group, any group, and someone commits a hate crime against me and, does something that would otherwise make it clear that it's a hate crime, but I'm not part of a protected class. How can that still be prosecuted as a hate crime?
Hate crimes are generally described as crimes based upon hatred of a particular characteristic. So it's an assault, but an assault because a person is, for example, Black. So that is a hate crime enhancement on an assault crime. So I'm not sure if that's what you're asking, but I think it may be there. In other words, it's not simply somebody acted with hate in their heart, but it was what specific characteristic that was identifiable was the root of the action.
And if somebody commits a hate crime by those standards against a person who's a member of a group that's not a protected class, and that hate crime happened because that person is a member of that group. So for example, someone commits a crime against a person, an act of violence against a homeless person because they're homeless, and they are not a member of a protected class in that municipality or anywhere. is that can that be considered a hate crime?
Not unless it would be defined as such. So it would be an assault. There's no question about that. For example, if there were that kind of behavior, but the assault would not have a hate crime enhancement. In other words, it wouldn't be subject to greater punishment unless that were defined for that particular class and there were evidence of that particular emotion in the act.
Thank you, Bill. And Carmen?
Just quickly, the Human Relations Commission did pass a sentence enhancement ordinance, or recommended the passing of a sentence enhancement ordinance that City Council passed. I believe it was in 2017 or 2018. So, perhaps one thing I invite you to look at is, should there be a revision or something added to that ordinance? I'm sure that would be a question you could ask City Attorney's Office.
Thank you, Carmen. And thank you all. Thank you, commissioners, for your questions. Thank you to the panelists again for sharing with us your tremendous amount of experience and expertise. We really appreciate you being here, and we invite you to hang out for our conversation that's happening right now and that we intended to end by 8 p.m. I'm trepidatiously optimistic. The objective of this conversation is to decide how we want to continue exploring this issue. So I think actually the first place I'd like to focus the conversation, because I heard from some of the panelists to focus on objectives, I would like to hear from commissioners about, I'm one person on the commission who really wanted to have this conversation. And so I'll speak to, my own objectives for wanting to have this conversation specifically. But I'd also like to hear from other commissioners, like what objectives come to mind when we have this conversation. For me personally, the reason I wanted to have this conversation was because I'm going to go back to a Kat pointed to earlier, which was a way of to have some recourse for protecting against discrimination when it happens, because to people who are unhoused or experiencing some social precarity. And I'll say the reason that has felt urgent for me, since we started talking about this during my time on the commission, is because I'm troubled by just really the general disdain for homeless people in our community. I for me, the objective is some level of protection for people in, the disdain, hate, discrimination they might encounter just having to do their daily activities and go about their lives in public, because where else are you going to do them? And I bring that up as an example because it was important to me to have this meeting, but I'd like to pass it to commissioners. What objectives come up for you when you hear all of this context from the panelists and thinking about what's important to you in context of this item? Christine.
Yeah, I would say I agree with that objective. Although this conversation does leave pretty open for me, wondering if this is the right vehicle for that. And so to that end, I feel like there's a lot more studying I want to do and a lot more education I need to have. I think another objective that I have is that, I had mentioned earlier that at a bare minimum, it is a statement of values. And I do think that even at a bare minimum, like that's an important thing. Even if there are open questions around enforceability or feasibility of managing such an impact that this might have from the city. Even that aside, which to me is still like just a big giant question mark because I don't consider myself educated enough about this. I do think that it is important to make that statement of value. And so I do think that in and of itself is a worthy objective.
Thank you, Christine. Carlos.
Se habló en este panel acerca de la vivienda, porque muchos carecen de vivienda o han perdido su vivienda. Entonces, ahorita hay dos expectativas que están ya pasaron una de las cámaras, la de los legisladores, ahorita va para la Cámara de Senadores. Entonces, estas dos expectativas que podríamos también nosotros apoyar para que no haya tanto exceso en la renta o, por ejemplo, evicciones. La primera es causa justa de evicciones, que es la HB 231171, que es cuando hay una evicción injusta, ¿sí? Entonces, esta es una de las leyes o legislaturas que que van para la Cámara de Senadores. La segunda es control local de la renta, que es la H 231115. Entonces, esta está promoviendo de que haya nada más un incremento anual y no un porcentaje tan elevado como se está haciendo. Entonces, si queremos también evitar que haya más homeless o personas sin hogar, podemos también nosotros apoyar estas legislaciones que se están promoviendo. Yo creo que por aquí también podemos llevar a cabo nuestra labor. No sé, eso es mi forma de pensar y es lo que yo también estoy apoyando. Como ustedes saben, estoy colaborando con 9 to 5 y con COFA y que están apoyando estas legislaciones. Gracias.
Thank you, Carlos. Speaker and JH, do you have anything to add in terms of objectives?
Yeah, I think that so in this conversation, I am like learning and understanding, and I agree with Christine. There's so much more learning I have to do. In this conversation, though, I'm understanding more that, discrimination against homeless individuals may be perpetuating the cycle of homelessness because, as homeless individuals face discrimination in different areas, including housing and employment, that discrimination can make it harder or more difficult for them to find stable housing and employment. And So yeah, that was just like something I really learned and understood through this, that that discrimination might be perpetuating the cycle of homelessness, which, as mentioned earlier, is such a hot topic right now and doesn't have an easy solution.
JH, I saw you come off mute. Do you have anything to add?
No, I don't really have anything to add. I just, how would I say? I think it's a hard subject to go through for me because, like I said, I've seen homelessness around, and see a lot more like done probably that I want to push through. But I know it's hard, and I live here even by not being homeless. Sometimes I've seen things that are really a little bit how would I say a little bit hard, but but I'm glad we are talking about it. I think by talking about it's a good step forward toward the need and what needs to be done, and how to move forward. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, JH. I wonder, we're coming up on our time, and I think, as other commissioners have already pointed to, this is a really complex topic that needs more discussion. I would like to point out some vehicles. I heard the word and I like it. To meet some of our objectives that I heard either from panelists or from commissioners. There was the idea of an enhancement to hate crimes legislation. There was the specific legislation that Carlos brought up. Was it State Bills 1171, and is that also a State Bill, Carlos, 1115 for unjust evictions and rent control? What I would suggest is that we agenda these items specifically to explore the enhancement to a hate crime protection, and potentially supporting writing to council to support the legislation to prevent homelessness in the first place. That seems like we have an easy mechanism to do that through a letter to council, and encouraging them to support legislation. I know that there's a timeline around that I don't recall that potentially staff can help us with. And then I think, and that one seems pretty like simple and like a simple path, like a straightforward path forward. And then there are some more like complicated long-term explorations that may include like further study and research about protected classes, but also enhancements to hate crime protections. So we don't have an action item, but my proposal would be that Carlos, Carlos, I don't mean to sign you up for things, but you're already working on this. That Carlos and staff work together to understand what it would look like to write a letter to council to encourage support of this legislation. And then that the HRC continues to explore some mechanism for working towards our objectives, which are like changing public discourse and culture and offering some level of protections and recourse to unhoused people or people experiencing social precarity when they experience discrimination or specifically a hate crime. And that's a continued exploration and developing issue for the HRC. And what I would propose is putting it in our forthcoming work plan, because that's where items go to live rather than fall off, or rather than, I don't know, like fall into obscurity and forgetting about, which I sometimes do. And I'm wondering if we can get a thumbs up from commissioners, since we're not like actually voting on this, as kind of an indicator that you'd like to move forward that way. And we can then thank the panelists for being here and finish our meeting. So commissioners, does this sound like a good way to move forward to you? Thumbs up if yes. Please hop off of mute if you have anything to add. Or I'm sorry, hands for those of us who can't turn our cameras on also indicate yes. Yeah, I'm seeing some kind of virtual thumbs up from Carlos, Piker, and Christine. And JH, I'm looking to you.
What do you say, Lindsay? Sorry, I couldn't hear the last part you said.
The last part, well, in summary, Carlos, my proposal is that Carlos will explore the
Writing a letter to the city council, correct?
Yep,
Yeah,
yep, and then and then we'll explore either we'll keep exploring some kind of protection for homeless people or people experiencing some sort of social precarity as part of our work plan.
Yep, that sounds like a plan to me. Okay.
Thank you, JH. Okay.
Thank you.
So for the audio record, that is a thumbs up from everybody, all of the commissioners. And we really want to thank all of our panelists for being here. Much appreciation for you and all of your experience and for spending the evening with us. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, and good luck to all of you. It's good seeing you. Take care.
Thank you, Carmen.
Thank
you
all
too.
for having me.
Opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Kat. Thank you,
everyone.
Bill.
Panelistas.
Thanks, everyone. Sana Sylvia.
You're on mute, Ana Sylvia. Saying great
Thank you for
things.
having the conversation. I think it's very valuable and very brave. So thank you for the space. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you, Ana Sylvia. Thank you for being here.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, everybody. That was very expeditious and productive. And for follow-up items and closing, I want to hand it to staff. Anything to add on the conversation before we pass it off to you for follow-up items unrelated to this item?
Follow up unrelated to this topic?
follow up of first, if you have it, follow up related to this topic,
Okay.
and then follow up unrelated to this topic.
Unrelated. Gotcha. I would just say, yeah, follow up related to the topic. While we were talking, reached out to some colleagues who are tracking state policy, just to let them know this is something you might be interested in exploring. So Ingrid and I can help move that piece forward and answer any questions you have, or enable them to answer questions you might have about state legislation. I guess I would just say there were a lot of different kind of data sets, policies, even the racial equity, and like lots of source materials kind of discussed by panelists. And what a great conversation. Thank you all for those questions and for bearing with us collectively as it took a little bit to really kind of envision what you wanted to have this conversation look like and then have it. So I'm kind of thinking, Ingrid, it would be really helpful for us in developing kind of the follow-up if there were very specific pieces of information that were referenced by the panelists this evening that you want to know more about. We're happy to reach out to them and ask for it, right? So, hey, that, panelist was talking about a policy here or, a situation there, could they share more? So I think that would probably help whatever those next steps are. And if we don't have that information ourselves yet, we will need to ask them. So instead of casting the net wider or broader than what you all are interested in, if you either want to drop in the chat or reach out to Ingrid or I and just let us know what specifically you want, that would be great. And Christine, I saw your hand. Did you want to add something real quick?
Yeah, I'm just interested in knowing how this has unfolded in the other cities that they mentioned where they made changes. Like, just a good place to start. Links to good articles would be sufficient.
Sure.
Thanks.
And Ingrid had done some research, on this previously and has a nice, set of articles. Sometimes the information was a little hard to land on, like whether it was a concept or something that was being implemented. But thank you for that, Ingrid, what you've already done. And I think we can definitely reach out to them for more information. Thank you. And Lindsay, see your chat as well.
Thank you.
So any other thoughts? Obviously, it doesn't have to be, 5 minutes after we get done, but later this week or maybe beginning of next. So again, I know for me, the longer the time goes after the meeting, the more I forget. So if you're thinking of it, please let us know. And yeah, and obviously I think the remaining, next steps will be to check in with Carlos and others and maybe come up with some suggestions for how else you might want to kind of pursue this topic if you do want to pursue it. And one thing that's important for Ingrid and I as staff to do is just be sure we are able to kind of help relay back and forth to council or other city staff what you all are thinking. The last thing we would ever want to happen is for you to really be very interested in topic, put a lot of energy into thinking about it and creating opinions and not quite be sure of where that might end up. That can be very deflating. It can, we just don't want that to happen. So I think that whatever the topic, whatever the situation. So we'll also just be here to help kind of serve as that liaison so that we let folks know you're thinking about this and can similarly help take back any questions, comments, kind of perspectives to make sure that your work, whatever it is really meaningful for you and meaningful for anyone else who is looking for your input. Lindsay?
I was unmuted and then I muted myself. I'm sorry about that. I just wanted to say thank you to Elizabeth and Ingrid because something that is probably always going on behind the scenes, but I saw it this time, is all of the organizing that you did to coordinate with all of the community partners to make the panel happen. And I really appreciate that.
Thank you again to our interpreters, always for a heady, topic.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So we know it's after 8 and we have a very, very quick staff update PowerPoint. I can whip through that probably pretty quickly. Obviously take any questions. It usually doesn't take that much time. But if that still sounds good, it looks like we lost Feker. Do we know, did she have to drop off early, or maybe that was a goof or a tech issue?
I don't know.
Okay. Hopefully she'll join, otherwise we will let her know. And actually,
She's back.
Ingrid, I need screen sharing.
She is back. Let me who's the co-host, Elizabeth.
Okay.
So you're able to share your screen. And Figure is back.
Yay.
Welcome
Hey
back.
everyone,
Vika.
I'm sorry I got disconnected.
Glad you are back. Okay, can everyone see that? Be a thumbs up. Okay, great. So very quick staff update. Lots going on as usual. The first thing that we want to share is congratulations. At last week's city council meeting, Feker was affirmed to continue a term that will take you through 2028. Doesn't that sound like a long time from now? But it's going to fly by, isn't it, Lindsay?
I know.
We're
It
really
seems like
happy to have
forever
you.
from now, but
Yeah,
yeah,
we're very happy to have
I'm
you,
so
Savannah.
happy. Yeah, I'm so happy and super thankful. So thank you all.
Thank you. And we also will be having a new HRC member, and Ingrid and I were just checking in, and we'll absolutely be sure we connect with Anna Pavlenko, who would have a term ending in 2024. So 1-year term. We obviously hope this will be a great experience for her. There will be orientation. There's some, kind of documentation and process. You've all been through that before, but we're really looking forward to working with her and hope that this she will be able to really lend a lot to the commission, as well as get a lot from it as well. Just really quickly here, you've already met Ana Silvia Avendaño Curiel, who was in the meeting earlier, serving as our equity policy advisor for the city. She and other staff members have been working on putting in place a process for all board, commission, and committee members to have access to what has been a mandatory racial equity training for city staff. It's Advancing Racial Equity, the Role of Government. And more information coming soon about that from Ingrid and myself. It's a really great opportunity for us to really kind of connect as board, commission, committee members, along with city staff, and leaning into this, this heavy work and this really hard and really important work before us. So look for more information on that. And we know already that you'll really appreciate and enjoy the opportunity for yourself and to connect with other folks like yourselves who are taking time out to lend your skill and wisdom and to help our city run better. Just another note about the police oversight panel Q&A that you had kind of in the meeting, and then kind of virtually by email and document exchange with Amy Kane. We provided those responses from Amy back to you, and we will just, Ingrid and I, just continue to check in both with you and with Amy, because there were some questions that might require follow-up, and some ideas that might require follow-up as that situation continues to unfold and the panel continue its work. So it's just really a note for that if you do have similarly just things that as you're reading that response, if you haven't already, or other issues, please don't hesitate to reach out to Ingrid and I, and we're happy to help serve as a liaison with Amy and on those issues. One key issue that HRC members have been interested in and wanting to track is one of the projects that we are funding and implementing through our American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA funding for COVID recovery and relief. In January, we mentioned that this topic was going up to City Council again in March. That happened on March 2, and City Council did approve and affirm this project along with several others for city staff to move ahead with. So not only this guaranteed income pilot project, but also millions more in investments in childcare for low-income community members, mental and behavioral health services and kind of capacity building around the workforce, diversifying that workforce, enabling more people who are uninsured or underinsured, experiencing systemic barriers to get that kind of assistance. This also includes a second mortgage program, which Carlos is familiar with the concept because the pilot will take place in the Ponderosa mobile home park, and a lot more capacity and ability for us to help meet basic needs, of which we know there are many, including support with rental assistance, with food security, et cetera. So we're really looking forward as staff to continue working on these projects. They'll continue through 2026, but anytime the HRC members are interested in having an update on this or other projects, once it comes, as they get implemented, we're more than happy to do that. The next major milestone for guaranteed income will happen later on in the summer, when that's our estimated time frame, and hopefully we'll be able to stick to it. To actually have applications available for this really innovative project. So again, happy to share then or at any point up to then if you're interested. Just a few additional items. As you know, we have been working the better part of 2022 on a concept that would potentially entail moving the Human Relations Commission from the Housing Human Services Department, where Ingrid and I are, and to the city manager's office. And just wanted you to know that that's still very much a possibility and we're thinking about it, but there's also a lot of details that might not be obvious that involve making sure there's the right level of staff support, kind of on the other end, and what might that look like. Getting a better estimate on how much time it might take and what issues are going to be addressed, and if it's best to for that still to take place in the city manager's office. So just letting you know that for now, you are where you are, and we're lucky in that we get to keep working with you here while we figure this out. But we'll definitely continue to keep you updated. Again, if you have any questions or concerns about this concept, until we have a little bit more information on our end to share, please reach out. We also are moving ahead, still kind of working on realigning the Human Relations Fund, which is not on your plate anymore as a body. We're hoping to have an application in an online grant management system launched as soon as possible. Our investment team is really working at it hard, and we'll be communicating out to any grantees and acknowledging that there may still be some questions or kind of confusion as to like, what's the process now and when can we apply again? So that's on our desk. And we also would still love if there is a commission member who wants to help make some of those decisions moving forward. The process is going to be differently streamlined to what it has been in the past, and not take up time at these meetings. So if this is something that you would be interested in a way in which you'd be interested in serving, please let Ingrid or I know. It would add so much value to have an HRC member continue to advise on that. But you know, it's not mandatory, but if it's something you're interested in, we'd love to have you help make sure that this transition period at least really has some consistency and the wisdom and benefit of your experience. There are always lots of different issues that are going up before City Council at regular meetings and at study sessions that may be of interest to you. We'll try to keep you appraised of what those are so that you know and can tune in, get some information, do some read aheads, or be present online or virtually or in person, as the case may be. One that you may be interested in, at least because of the conversation tonight, as well as past interest, is that on April 16, there's going to be a study session meeting that will be virtual. That will be focused on a homelessness update, but also an update on family homelessness and what the city and our county colleagues and our nonprofit agencies locally are doing to help prevent that and to serve families and individuals who are already experiencing that problem. And lastly, from all of us on staff, we just really want to say thank you, Lindsay. We just cannot say thank you enough and show enough appreciation for the thoughtfulness and the heart and the wisdom and the passion and just your kind, open and inclusive self and what you've taken to this space and how you've encouraged all of us to really do our best and be centered in what this community needs for service and for encouragement and empowerment and engagement. So we will be seeing you in a few weeks when we get together in person for a little thank you. But Ingrid and I would be remiss if we didn't just share our thanks again for you here and to anybody watching. It's really been a pleasure.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I agree completely. And I appreciate all of you. I appreciate your camaraderie and collaboration. And I just have a lot of appreciation for all of you here. And I feel I feel good knowing that you all are going to continue to do the work when I'm not here. and I will see you when we get together in person, and I will see you all again around town, even if it's digitally. Thank you. Thank you for the acknowledgement. I really appreciate that.
So just quickly, and then I don't know if there are any questions on that, but just for a recap on, our to-dos, we'll get back in touch with you regarding any kind of potential or process for reaching out to council on policy issues. We'll make sure we get your input on specifically what kinds of materials to request from the panelists from this evening and plan the next agenda items. We'll follow up with you on several items, including welcoming our new HRC member, having meetings, scheduling trainings, etc. So let's see what Ingrid, I know you have a lot more to say and add, I'm sure. So I'm going to put myself on mute.
Just a few items in addition to verbalizing my appreciation to you, Lindsay. So please add it to your calendar. We will get together and celebrate you and the impact that you have had in this commission. On April 11th, starting at 5:30, location TBD. I will let you know where we're meeting. And also, I sent out an updated calendar invitation last month about the ongoing meetings for the HRC. So please update it in your calendars. and those are also available on the website, and those are updated. So please make sure that you have those written down. Yeah, happy to support in any way and in every way possible. So yeah, that's all I have to add regarding important dates and calendars. Yep, that's it.
Thank you, Ingrid. Well, everyone, thank you so much for your collaboration. I've really appreciated working with all of you. And like I said, I just feel so good knowing that you will continue to do the work on into the future, and looking forward to seeing you in person. Some of you I've never met in person, which is wild.
Crazy.
Yeah. And I think then we can adjourn the meeting at 8:25 if we have a motion, a second, and a vote.
Gracias, Lindsay, por toda tu participación. Gracias, hemos aprendido, bueno, en mi tiempo de casi un año, un poquito más de un año que tengo aquí, he aprendido mucho de ti y pues nos da tristeza perderte, pero todo tiene un principio y un fin. Y siendo las 8:25, yo pido la moción para terminar esta reunión.
Thank you so much, Carlos. Do we have a second?
¿Quién me va a ejecutar?
I second that.
Got motion and a second, and I'll say. And we've got the visual eyes from Christine, and another one for good measure from Fuker. So we have adjourned the meeting. It is 8:26. Thank you all so very much. Thanks, commissioners, for your participation. Thanks, Elizabeth and Ingrid, for your facilitation and for your organizing. And thank you to the interpreters for advancing language justice at our meetings. That is so very much appreciated. Thank you,
Thanks,
everyone.
everyone. Have a good evening. Good night.
Todos, buenas noches.
Thank
Adiós.
you.
Thank
Bye.
you.